My name is Angie Charboneau Folch, and I am a proud LGBTQ plus leader. I've been a school administrator now for 15 years. When I first got into being an assistant principal, my journey started at a pretty large high school, and I felt very comfortable. I was out as a teacher and made that transition into administration already as an out staff member. And I felt very supported by the administration there and the lead principal who hired me into an assistant principal role. And so my initial experience as I started my journey as an LGBTQ school administrator was very positive. I worked for a school that was very inclusive. The principal was very proactive when it came to LGBTQ issues. And I actually had taught a multicultural perspectives course when I was a teacher, and he was always very supportive of me bringing in a panel as we covered the LGBTQ unit. And so my journey started really positive. And as I made transitions into other school districts, it didn't always feel as safe to be out, especially, with having to go back to being a probationary principal. In Minnesota, we have, the tenure. And so that you need to secure that second contract to be tenured. And so it always feels a little bit unsafe. And there's always that hesitation as you make a career change into a new district when you're back to being probationary, to almost kind of a feel for what the culture of the school is like. And so after I changed into a different role with a different district, it almost feels like then you're forced to go back into the closet in that sense. And part of my journey now being a principal for 15 years, I always feel like to live your truth and be who you are. But it's easier to say that 15 years into my career. When I was a younger administrator, only into my first couple of years, it didn't always feel safe to do that. It didn't feel safe to live your truth, mostly because you want to be able to establish yourself and establish your reputation, and not to be I don't want to use the word associated, but you don't want to be branded, right, or labeled as one thing. You want your work to speak for itself. You want your dedication to the students to shine above any other noise that might be happening because you're out and proud. And so for me, with my journey moving into, I've been in 4 different school districts. I've had kind of that mixed response where I've worked for districts where it's been very inclusive, very accepting, being out and proud LGBTQ leader was never an issue or a concern. And then I've worked in districts where it has been an issue and a concern, where it hasn't felt safe to be out and to live my truth until I first had a reputation established. And so, that's part of, my journey with being a school administrator for the last 15 years. And so what I think is important for others to know is it's okay to be, courageous and live your truth. But at the same time, I also think it's important to be mindful, and you really have to kind of know your school, your district, your community, who you're working with. So when I think about challenges being an out LGBTQ school leader, for me, I feel very fortunate that in Minnesota, I feel like there's a very accepting overall of LGBT. But that's not true in every area of Minnesota. And so I think part of the challenge is safety. And it's also making sure that you have security in your job placement. Like I kind of talked about, knowing when to come out, or kind of feeling like you're forced to be back in the closet. It's because, you never know who might have a say in what happens in your professional career pathway. And so for me, I think, part of the challenges is, there's always fear of discrimination. There's always fear of prejudice. No matter how great of a job you feel like you're doing, it's almost like it's always there. And so with challenges of maybe being passed over for job promotion or advancements. Currently I'm an assistant principal. If I would look for head principal positions, um, would that be an issue that I'm out, and uh, could that be a, a factor that plays into whether or not I'm offered a job? Those are things that you always have to think about in the back of your head, which is unfortunate, in 2021, that we still have to have those worries and challenges. But I think it's very true. And when I think about education overall, I think some of the things that sometimes I have to be more mindful of. For example, as an assistant principal, if I have to investigate a behavior, if I get a report that girls are doing something in the girls' locker room, I always make sure I have someone else with me. I don't. It becomes kind of one of those things where it can feel like you have to just make sure you're covering your bases, that you have other staff members with you to be witness to what you might have said or your actions, especially if I need to go into a girl's locker room or into a girl's bathroom to investigate anything like that. That's always kind of one of those underlining things. All of us can have students say things or make allegations, but sometimes I think when you're LGBTQ, you have to also be mindful that there will be people that might have issue. And I've had parents in my office tell me that their student doesn't care for me because I'm a lesbian. When people say those things to you, to your face, it's like, that's fine. Everyone has their right to their own opinions, but that always kind of sits in the back of your head. I think with the other issues, for example, there's been a lot of debate around transgender students and transgender students' ability to use locker rooms and facilities that they identify with. That's always been kind of a hot topic. And sometimes I feel like a challenge could be people might have a perception that I have an agenda because I'm out and an LGBTQ school leader. And the truth is, I don't have an agenda to push any, gay issues or gay rights or things like that. My agenda is to have security and inclusion for all students. And so sometimes that can be a challenge, I think, trying to find the balance between doing what's right for students and not having that public perception or accusations or whatever that I'm trying to push an agenda, which is not true. So that can be a challenge, I think, as well. For me right now, or as I reflect on my 15 years, I think the areas of support come from, you'll have coworkers who reach out to you, who let you know they support you. Being an administrator, though, that gets a little bit tricky because you're the boss. And so you have that different level because you're in a position of power over your staff or whatever. And so the people that you can really lean on as a principal is other principals, other administrators. And so, and that's where I think having the NASSP network is so key and essential, is because often you don't always have other administrators to lean on. But for me, I've always been able to find those in the different districts I've worked with. I've had very supportive lead principals. I've had very supportive superintendents. I've had non-supportive coworkers in administrative roles as well. But I think the key is to kind of, know who your people are that have reached out to you and say, we support you. For me, I guess I find more of my support with my wife and my family than I do necessarily in the workplace. I've had plenty of parents reach out to me, and it's not like, oh, we support you being out in LGBTQ, but rather we appreciate all the work that you've done for our kid. I see you working hard. In our school, we do have some kids that have identified as LGBTQ, and those parents have reached out to me and saying, I feel like my kid can be safe in your school because you were there, and that makes you feel great. But again, I'm not here just to protect LGBTQ students. I'm here to protect all students. I want everyone to feel included. I want everyone to be able to come to school and have that sense of belonging. Um, I've had I've had the support of I wouldn't say the whole school board, but I would say I've had one or two school board members who have reached out to me and have, I was, had my back or have shown me support. Again, I don't think it's to LGBTQ, it's to my job performance, what they see me doing, my reputation that I have built. And so that's where I feel like the support comes in. And so, you know, the that's the primary focus of support. You do a good job, the community sees it, they recognize it, and they reach out to you. Um, and with the LGBTQ part of it, which would probably be leading into the next question with the network, that's where you find the support. Being part of the LGBTQ network through NASSP has been a much needed resource. Again, 15 years into my career, and this is my first year that I've been able to reach out and meet other administrators and principals and professionals in our education field who can identify. I have wonderful administrators and coworkers that I work with currently who I know support me, but at the same time they don't identify and they can't walk in necessarily the same shoes. And so sometimes that's what you need is you need people who can identify with some of the journeys and challenges. And so the network for me has been a huge, it's like another layer of community added into my professional career. And not only so we can talk about some of the challenges and issues that face LGBTQ school administrators, but also just other professionals who do the job and you can bounce ideas off of with just other things that face schools today and not just necessarily surrounded around one issue. So I always think expanding your network is important, but to be able to expand my network and build a new level of community has been much needed, especially in a year that's been very challenging in general in education. And so for me, it's a priority. Like whenever we have our meetings, I mean, East Coast and Central Time difference. I'm meeting pretty generally in the evening at home on my own personal time. But for me, it's a priority to be able to network and to connect and to build friendships. And so when I go to NASSP conference, I'll be able to, whenever we can actually see each other again in person, be able to know, hey, I now have a network of administrators that I have a connection with throughout the country, not just here locally at home. So it's been huge. It's essential, and I wish this would have been a resource for me 15 years ago when I made the transition into administration.